Good morning.
Good morning, Peg.
Good morning, Maribeth Howell, formerly known as, you were not formerly known as, you always have been and always will be Maribeth Howell. Well, thank you to a sister story and your willingness to respond quickly that you would be happy to do this as part of our congregation history.
Right.
So we have 30 minutes that you can share your life. So you have to be somewhat, pick out the special times. I love your picture also behind your head. Okay, so let's start at the beginning, and you can say as much as you want or as little as you want because we don't really know. All right, so just begin at the beginning where you grew up, and right now you live in Hyde Park, Chicago, correct?
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about your family, your beginnings and schooling and et cetera.
Okay. Well, I'm now living in Hyde Park, and this is the first time I've been back in Chicago since I entered the congregation in 1967. So I was about 5 years old, I think, when I entered. But I grew up on the far south side, so 89th and Stony Island. And I grew up in a family of one older sister and one older brother. My sister Barb and her family moved to California shortly after they were married and had 2 children. And my brother Bill still lives in Chicago in the area of Evergreen Park. So it's been wonderful to be back here, although under these circumstances, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to explore Chicago. So let's see.
What was your family life like?
Well, I was just going to say, we grew up in St. Albie's Parish, which has recently merged with 2 other parishes on the south side. We lived in the same parish for most of my life. My sister is 8 years older. My brother is 3 years older. And we all went to St. Albie's grade school. My father was a machinist for the city of Chicago, and my mother went back to work when I started first grade. So it was, we lived in flats, 3 flats in Chicago all my life.
Chicago's kind of known for its flats, right?
That's right. That's right.
Very nice, long and narrow, yeah.
That's right. And we have what we would refer to as gangways between the apartment buildings. And my mother had a very colorful language. And when she would get upset, she would use that colorful language. My father would always say, "Mary and the neighbors," because if the windows were open, you could hear conversations,
right?
Because the building was like 10 feet away between one another. So yeah, both my parents worked. It was necessary. And we rarely went on vacations. Most of the time it was an opportunity for my mom and dad to coordinate their time off. And usually we would have a week when both of my parents were off together, and a week when one parent was off, and a week when the other parent was off. And during those occasions, what we did was we just visited special places in Chicago. Like we would go to the beach and we'd visit Museum of Science and Industry. We'd go downtown. And at the time, the Prudential building was considered the tall building, the tall skyscraper downtown. And now it's dwarfed by the John Hancock building, the Sears building. So, but we did things around the city, and we never felt deprived because it was just the way things were. And it was just wonderful. And we'd go to the beach, visit different places.
And you had your mother and dad to yourself, kind of, for that week, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we all went to St. Albie's grade school. And then my brother went to Mount Carmel High School. And I went to Aquinas, just as my sister had done. And I'm the last person to have entered the congregation from Aquinas that is still here. Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
So that's my claim. That's one of my claims to fame.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the other piece is that St. Albie's did not have Adrian Dominicans until I was in 6th grade. Prior to that time, we had the Nashville Dominicans.
Oh.
And St. Albie's was their last school, as they said, up north. And when they went back to Tennessee, the Adrians came. And that was, I have fond memories of both congregations.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mary Burns, who was formerly Marie Joachim, she was our principal.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Kay Homan, and who was Mark Christine, and Margaret Augustine, who was Margaret Augustine.
She died.
Yes. I can see her. And
I can too, yes.
Both of those women made final profession when they were at St. Albie's, because we remember, we knew they were young, but, as kids, you don't really realize how old sisters are.
Right.
But we knew each had made final profession because they would tap their ring on the desk after they came back from finals. So, we just had very fond memories of St. Albie's, and also of Aquinas. I had, I had all these names in my head before. I probably shouldn't speak because I can't remember all their names now. But I was at Aquinas from 63 to 67, and I entered the congregation right after high school.
Who was instrumental or inspired you?
Oh, there were several. Margaret Mary Hines.
Oh, my.
Helen Treese Meyer.
Yes.
Anne Renee, and Anne, another Anne. I can see her perfectly. Who else did we have? And recently, one of the women who was interviewed, a former, Henry Mary. She had just recently been interviewed as a former, I think it was Jody who interviewed her.
Okay.
So, and we had wonderful classes. They were wonderful teachers. Joanne Fleischaker, she was my guidance counselor. Oh, and Thomas Owen, she also was very instrumental. She was my freshman homeroom teacher. And both she and Joanne, I remember, inviting me to consider entering the community.
So they asked the question, okay.
Yep, they did. I was enthusiastic about it. My mother was not enthusiastic about it. My dad was of the disposition, whatever's going to make you happy.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
So we had a little more than a little tension in the house over my entering the congregation. But I think after a while, my mother saw that I was happy and she was resigned to it.
So you entered right out of high school?
Yes.
Okay. And what year was that?
1967.
67. And our formation was a little bit changed at that time.
Well, it varied. Every 6 months, our clothing changed. When I entered, we wore the traditional postulant outfit with a little black veil.
Right.
And a cape. And then at Christmas time, the capes came off and we wore white blouses instead of black blouses. We were received in that long habit with a modified veil. And that next Christmas, the habits were shortened. We made first profession in the modified habit, but at that time, the congregation had just finished its chapter of renewal, and we were supposed to wear the habit during professional and liturgical times.
Right.
and we could wear secular clothing at other times. Also, the group that entered in 67, at the time there were 50 of us, there are now 7. At the time, we were the first group to be working part-time while we were studying. We were
Now explain working. You worked around campus, is that what you mean?
Oh, we worked around campus as postulants and novices, but when we made first profession, we were sent out to complete our, if we did not have our bachelor's degrees, we completed that degree. And we worked part-time wherever, just about wherever we could find a position. And the thinking was that most young women our age were also working part-time to supplement the cost of their education. So 3 of us, Carol Jean Kesterke, Sharon Spambauer, and I, all who are still here, worked at a little department store called Best & Company. And so because we wore the habit at school, we would get on the bus and go to Northland with our change of clothing in a bag. And we would go into the restroom at Hudson's, change our clothes, and then go down the mall to work at Best & Company.
Oh, so, my word.
Yeah, it was.
So the 3 of you worked at the same place?
Yes.
Well, there's some companionship there.
Right. And there were also a group of women in our class who worked at the National Bank of Detroit in the stock department after school. And so, and they were so efficient, they, the boss wanted to know were there others that could come and work because they got work done.
So they knew that you were nuns?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Did you have to make that known right away?
We did to our employer, but
okay.
So for example, at Best & Company, they did ask that we keep it kind of quiet. Although once, I still remember Carol Jean, Sharon, and I were on the stairway going up from the employees' lounge to the main floor. And one of the employees stopped us and said, "Are you 3 sisters?" 2 said no and 1 said yes. And then she clarified and said, "Well, I don't mean the religion kind, but you all look alike." And then we were all clear on, no, we're not sisters. So, yeah, there were some exciting moments and some.
Yeah, you certainly started your time with us with lots of change.
Yes, indeed.
So you must be very flexible now with anything, any changes that you have.
I hope so.
What about your ministerial life? You've probably had lots, but can you share a couple that are, yeah.
Okay, so my first degree, my bachelor's degree, was in special education, focusing on hearing impaired children. And I did my student teaching at the Detroit School for the Deaf, which was just off Wayne State's campus. And then I was invited to stay on full time. So that was my first ministerial experience. And then during the summers, I started taking theology at St. Paul University in Ottawa, and I absolutely loved it. And then eventually I went full time. And after completing what they call my master's and my license in theology, I, for 2 years, taught at Kino Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. It was affiliated with University of San Francisco. And I did classes mainly in parishes. The institute, which was established by Ernie Larkin, a Carmelite, and a bishop at the time, they provided the religious education certification for the diocese. So there were some classes where people would take the class because they wanted to be certified religious ed teachers. And then there were a lot of other people that took it simply out of interest. So one night I might be teaching a class in Sun City, Arizona. No, that was usually in the morning because Sun City was a retirement center. And these people were often very well educated, older adults. And then the next day, I would be in another part of the city with people of very diverse backgrounds. So it was a real learning experience in terms of teaching, how material had to be adapted to the audience. And but it was a wonderful experience, and I lived with 5 sisters, Rena Capolazzo,
nice.
Mary Jane Lubinsky, Mary Sue Kennedy, and Marie Breitenbeck.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I still remember it was a year they had done census, and we received a call. I received the call that night. And the individual was checking on the names of the residents. And it was like the UN, you know. So the poor individual is trying to pronounce all of these names, which were of very diverse backgrounds. But it was a great, great community.
Nice way to begin. Yeah.
Yes, really.
And then where did you go? Not, another significant one, perhaps.
Well, the next significant thing I did was I went to Leuven, Belgium, and I finished my doctoral studies there. And that was a marvelous opportunity. Both of those educational experiences were incredibly enriching, because when I went to Ottawa, I met people from all over Canada, and I was so ignorant of Canada, I could not at the time have named the provinces to you, and yet the Canadians had to know the capital of every state in the United States. Wow. And then when I went so in Ottawa, I was exposed to people from East to Western Canada, as well as the United States. But then in Leuven, there were people from all over the world. And that was, again, just an incredible experience. It was very difficult educationally, because I had not been aware of how challenging and different the European educational system was. It was straight lecture, memorize, be ready for your exams. But it did provide me, I believe, with a very good theological education.
And didn't you have another kind of experience over there in Louvain?
You mean the accident?
No, I was just thinking, God certainly has surprised you in many ways during your lifetime. We say it's, it's the Spirit is working in us, and you think, God, what are you doing? But I'm sure you've learned much from that. But anyway, moving on, you don't have to talk about that. I just remember that about you, and that was how horrible that was. Yeah. Well,
it was very challenging.
Yeah.
But there were some people who had just been so kind and so thoughtful. Kate Dooley, who was a Cincinnati Dominican, someone had given me her name to contact her about coming to Leuven, and she was returning to the States. She left me everything that I needed in her studio apartment, and that was just so kind and wonderful. Gracious. Yeah.
So what happened when you came back? Where do we find you? What was one more significant ministry that you've?
Oh, there have been many. When I first came back, I was at Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama for 2 years.
Okay.
That was the first place that I taught after having completed my doctoral studies. And I'd never been in Alabama. And I had read in the NCR when I was in Leuven, people would pass them around, and I read that there was an opening at Spring Hill College. I knew it was Jesuit. And so I called to find out about applying. And I still remember the secretary of the theology department, Joy. She was just a delight. She told me that Chris Viscardi, who was the chair, was in a meeting. And so I said, well, would you give him my name, please? I'm calling from, this is long distance. And she said, well, where are y'all calling from? And I said, Belgium. And her response was, Jesus. And I had reminded her of that later. And she said, well, yeah, I never had a call from Belgium before.
That's cute.
So, yeah. And then I went on and I taught at Kenrick Seminary in St. Louis. I received a call and was invited to interview there. And I was delighted to receive the interview because at the time, being in Mobile felt more foreign than being in Belgium. At the time, so the first thing I did was confer with Joan Delaplane, whom I knew was in St. Louis, and I asked her about the seminary. And then I went for an interview. And at the time, the Vincentians were at the seminary. They had the contract with the diocese. And honestly, they were just a wonderful group of men. They were so welcoming and hospitable. It was a young faculty. It was very engaging, and there was a lot of very positive camaraderie. And the year I came, the other woman who joined the faculty was Lynn Gerald.
Wow.
Who's a canon lawyer.
Yes, I know
and
her. Mm-hmm.
Lynn and I actually shared an office space. But yeah, I would say most of my years at Kenrick were wonderful. Mm-hmm. And towards the end of my stay there, Archbishop May had died, and he was a wonderful man. And then the Vincentians no longer had the contract with the diocese. There were just some significant changes that, and I had then received an invitation to interview at St. Mary's in Cleveland, where Don Cousins was the rector. And
that's right. Yes.
So again, I had, for the most part, I had very positive experiences.
And very well-known people that you were gifted to be with. Yeah, that's good. All right, so presently, tell us where you are presently.
Okay. I'm in Hyde Park, and when I look out the window, I see our beautiful Lake Michigan.
So that's why you keep looking over there.
That's right. Oh, it's magnificent. Every day it's different.
Good.
So I left. Most recently, I'd been teaching at Aquinas Institute in St. Louis, and I left there and was offered a position. It's part-time, and it is between the Religious Formation Conference and Catholic Theological Union. And my role is coordinator of the Together program. And this is a program, I would say, all right, so the director of the Religious Formation Conference had written a grant, and this grant really followed a presentation that Sandra Schneiders and Mary Johnson had done at a previous Congress. And Sandra had emphasized especially the fact that, as we know, most women entering religious congregations today are a bit older than they were during our entrance time. And many have professional careers, but they have often very little theology. So in addition to that, I think many congregations are reticent to send their sisters off too early to study theology, at least if they're not going to be living with their own community. So what the grant that Ellen, the director of the Religious Formation Conference, did, she wrote this grant, and as a result of it, one wing of a resident floor at CTU is reserved for this program. And its emphasis is for women who are either temporary professed or fairly newly finally professed. And it will provide them with an opportunity to live in community, to study at CTU, and to have some ongoing formation. Now, there were 4 women who were scheduled to be part of this program this year, but because of the virus, 2 are living with their communities, one in Riverside, Michigan, she's an IHM from Monroe, and one in Cleveland, who is a Chardon Notre Dame. And then the third sister, who is living on the 7th floor, just 2 doors down from where I have an office, is from Korea. And even though the students have been discouraged from residing in the residence this year, she felt that because of the language, she needed more time and isolation to be able to take her classes, because all of CTU's classes are online at this time.
Right.
So, and then there had been a 4th woman from Botswana who was planning to come, but her visa didn't come through. So in order to keep the focus of the program, and that is to build community among these women and to provide some ongoing, I would say, more community stimulation, what I've done is, because Thursday nights at CTU have historically been identified as formation nights, we Zoom every Thursday evening.
Okay.
And either we have a guest speaker or we alternate that Thursday with praying together. And so far we've had Don Senior join us, Barb Reed has joined us. Our next time that we have a guest, Marianne Fallman is going to join us and speak on what to do with stress and how stress affects the body. Joy Grow is going to visit with us and speak to us about, she's going to introduce theological reflection. And I'm in the process of lining up speakers, or I'm calling them guests, for second semester. And then the women also have a Zoom night. I call it their hangout night. I'm not part of it, but it would be how they would gather if they lived in the same wing and hung out in a lounge. So
well, that sounds like a lot of fun. But you know, you are so energetic. You're so enthusiastic about everything. What do you do to keep that enthusiasm up? Because I know you've had some challenges.
Yeah, I have had challenges.
I need to know the challenges, but I mean, you always seem to come out.
I hope so.
Positive.
Well, when I'm really done, I guess I cry, but I try to get some exercise in, mainly just stationary bike.
Yeah, that's good.
Or walk.
Right.
I mean, although the last time I was, not the last time, but when I was walking along Lake Michigan a few weeks ago, I hit an unlevel sidewalk, went down and down. So initially I just had scars all over my face, and people told me, no, in Hyde Park, you have to look down when you're walking because so many of the trees have shifted the level of the sidewalk. I said, but why would I look down when I've got Lake Michigan to the side of me, you know?
And so you learned.
Yeah, I did.
So where do you think the Spirit's leading you now, or somewhat settled?
Oh, sweet Jesus. I think I'm somewhat settled. I certainly don't want to move again. I mean, this, you know, the older we get, moves get more difficult. But also this view is so magnificent. I started to ask one of the women I work with, Kathy Candifer, who's a BVM, and I said, Kathy, so where around here do you go for a retreat, or if you want to escape for a few days? And then I said to myself, yes, I don't want to go anywhere. I've got this view that is magnificent. And I'm looking forward to eventually someone joining me, because this is a 2-bedroom apartment, and I would welcome a companion. But one of the things that's really, really a blessing is that directly beneath me, Barb Reed lives, and she teaches at CTU, and a few doors down from her is Lucy Ann Sears. They're both Grand Rapids Dominicans. We are all very careful about wearing masks and when we go shopping, etc. But twice a week we get together for a glass of wine, dinner, and prayer. And we don't sit at a table, we sit distanced in the living room, but it's just wonderful to have the two of them to form a community with.
So they're part of your bubble, we call it here.
Yeah, they're my bubble.
Have these bubbles. On another note, is there something about you that would surprise us if we knew? Something.
You want me to tell a secret about myself?
Well, you know, sometimes you think, oh gosh, I know I tell people, huh? Go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking forward to the time that the Art Center, just a few blocks away, is open. It's closed right now for classes, but I would love to get back to playing on the potter's wheel.
Oh, so you're a potter. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't call myself a potter. I'm a wannabe potter.
In process. Yeah.
I said, you know, I think if there are two things that I would love to have been able to explore earlier in my life, it would have been pottery and music. I love the sound of the cello. And I mean, I cannot even read music. I know that notes go up and down, and I'm a good follower, but I can't really read it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but those are two things that I'm really attracted to. And if I want to say when that art center opens,
Mm-hmm.
they do have different classes, and I'd love to check out the pottery.
Is there a scripture saying or some model that has inspired you up to this time of your life that you'd share with us? Some wisdom that you have about your life?
Do I have wisdom? Let's see.
You do have wisdom.
Well, there are any number of texts that I love, and especially the Psalms. So Psalm 139, oh God, you examine and you know me. You know when I sit and when I stand. You know my desires from afar. I love texts in Isaiah that speak of new hope and new life. There's just so many.
What about, we just had a wonderful, engaging weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are your thoughts on our future as Adrian's, our future as this new chapter? In one sentence.
There is hope for the future.
Yes, always.
And
Always.
And can I add another sentence?
Oh, yes, definitely.
All right. I've been using this quotation a lot recently because I did a little Zoom with a group of women in Ann Arbor on prophets of hope. And I thought, well, so many people think the prophets are just angry all the time. And I came across a quotation I'd heard many, many times before, and it struck me as perfect, not just related to the prophets, but to our current world.
Mm-hmm.
And the quotation is from St. Augustine, and it says, hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Anger
at the way things are, and courage that they will not remain so, something like that.
Yeah.
And I just think, so many people, so many of us are angry today over our current political situation. Mm-hmm. And anger is not something many of us are comfortable with, but when you think of anger in that positive sense, that it is a part of hope, but it needs to go somewhere. And therefore we need to have the courage to help change things. Mm-hmm. So hope isn't just an ideal in the sky. It's something we need to help bring about, I think. That's part of hope.
There was a concept that we talked about this weekend about space. It's a safe space, but I love the thing about it's a brave space. Mm-hmm. And what can we do if we're in a brave space? And does that give us courage to speak up, which is what we're all about with our preaching?
Yeah, I thought Leonardo was marvelous.
Pardon? Oh,
I thought Leonardo was marvelous.
Beyond. Did you want to say something to add that I forgot to ask or that you wished I would have asked? So you can end this and really stand by that window?
Well, I think, as you indicated, I've had quite a number of diverse experiences, but I think one of the experiences that was most significant for me was being part of an extremely collaborative project, and that was the project that brought forth finally Dominican Praise.
That's right. Oh my.
Yeah, and I was just contacted.
Explain what Dominican Praise is, because not only sisters watch this, but there's a lot of benefactors. Quickly, because our time is up.
It was a concept that I think had been bubbling up in a variety of circles in different Dominican congregations, and it was the hope that there be a prayer book for Dominican women that we could use that would be inclusive, have inclusive language. And it ended up because initially there were 17 congregations in the U.S. That became part of this project. We had people of marvelously talented people of different areas. So we had liturgists, we had New Testament scholars, Old Testament scholars, musicians, leadership, supportive of this project. And, it took about 5 or 6 years to give birth to it, but it's marvelous. And I was just contacted by Ann Lithgow, who is on the leadership team for the Dominicans of Peace. And she asked if I would speak to someone from Global Sisters Report. And I did that yesterday. And there's a woman who's writing an article about new prayer books that are inclusive, but written by Dominican and by various religious congregations. So she's interviewing Benedictines, Mercies, Dominicans, Franciscans, Ursulines. So this should be coming out, and it should be quite interesting. But
wonderful.
It just, it was a marvelous experience. I mean, we had diversity, tension, but the product, I think, is delightful.
Right.
I'm biased, I know.
Right. That's okay. That's a good bias. So thank you so much, Maribeth. You are a gift to us, and your energy and your enthusiasm about life. And I know it's not always been happy times, but you've been able to transfer those happy times into the person that you are. So thank you, and continue to preach, continue to look out that window, and just thank you for the gift you are to us as Adrian Dominicans.
You're welcome, and thank you for the gift you are.
You're very welcome. Okay.
God bless. Take care.